have you now.
You're fulfilling your destiny.
Show me again the power of the darkness.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll. D20radio.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Knights of Ren episode 203. This week, we have Rick and Jay as our hosts. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, guys.
Hey, what's going on? All right, so Fantasy Flight gave us a surprise announcement about the new Spirit of Rebellion set, and we have got a bunch of cards we're going to be talking about this week. But before we get into that, we have got some tournament reports from myself and Jay. So this week, I went to one of my local game stores called Games to You in Altamont Springs, and I TO'd the event. It was a really great turnout. We had 18 players and a bunch of decks that just played really well. I mean, of course, we had the traditional Vader Raider, Jango Veers, Jabba, and Vader, but the two decks that actually came out on top in a 4-0 undefeated stance was Double Dooku, Double Kylo, and Elite Balatik, Trooper, and Jango. I'm not going to go into the lists. I don't actually know what they were, but it was really interesting to see that the meta is not just being dominated by aggro popular decks or control decks. Like, there was a hefty mix of different play styles. I actually saw a Padme Akbar deck that was really interesting to watch. That was actually my favorite game to watch because there was a couple of like timing questions in there, but one of the games ended with that player using hyperspace jump to end the turn, and the opponent had no cards in hand, no cards in deck, but they were running Jango Veers and they were about to roll out all their dice. And so, you know, he was like, end of game. He was like, it was really funny to watch. So it was a great turnout. We had a lot of great players come, and, you know, it goes to show that your meta can be influenced by very unique decks. So, you know, be encouraged if you don't have or don't want to play, you know, Jango Veers, Vader Raider. There's other decks that are winning and doing very well in meta tournaments. So, Jay, what did your stuff look like?
Yeah, so we played in Fremont, California at one of the locations of a nice store called Game Castle. We had 20 people. I didn't TO at this time, but I was there to help answer rules questions and stuff. But the location was really nice. It was packed because they had the Star Trek X-Wing style game going on. They had Game of Thrones store champs going on. Just like a bunch of games all trying to occupy the same amount of space. And it's not the smallest venue. They have a nice store. They just they only anticipated 10 of us coming, and there were 20, which was really cool. And, you know, we made it work, and everybody had a good time. I brought my Ibala Jango Trooper deck. I have been testing other stuff. Like, I messed around with Luke Akbar, I messed around with Poe Double Hired Gun, and I like those decks, but I just have a kinship with my Ibala Jango list now, and it's just what I'm most comfortable playing, and so I just decided to run it. I also have been testing a lot of Vader Kylo, and been enjoying that too. But anyway, as far as the turnout went, there were 4 Jango Veers players. There was a Luke Akbar ran by my buddy Corwin. We had a very good close match that came down to the absolute wire, and I accidentally screwed up and tried to play Tactical Mastery, and then I did the foolish thing of being like, all right, Tactical Mastery, I have these 2 cards, you know, I win, and then it was revealed that my trooper was dead, and I couldn't Tactical Mastery, so if we rewound, he could have responded and shielded some. So then we just sort of played a little game of like, all right, even with the knowledge, even with you knowing what's in my hand, like, is there a scenario where you don't die? And we ran through 4, okay, if I play Armed to the Teeth first, then this happens. If I play Fight Dirty, then this happens. And poor Corwin was searching every possible avenue to maybe snake out the win, and our health difference was so low, but it didn't come out for him. But it was a really good game, and he played really well. If only he found his all-ins, I think I would have been toast. A couple other people played. There were 2 Vader Raiders. The event was won by Chud with his super well-oiled Vader Raider deck. We played, and he beat me in 6 minutes. He killed Bala turn 1 and managed to put damage on Django. And then turn 2, beat the crap out of Django. And then turn 3, he had it so that Django couldn't activate without being killed by backup muscle. So I just stooped and shook his hand and stewed in the corner for a while, trying to calm down. But I mean, he plays that deck like a pro. Like, he's played that deck over 100 times. Like, you know, congrats to Chud here in that event. So I ended up taking second. My other good friend Travis, I brought him up before as the Poe hired gun player from the previous event, but he ran Vader Jabba this time, and he did well. He took third. The gentleman who I met at the venue took fourth with Django Veers, and then another good friend of mine, Matt, he took fifth with he was the other Vader Raider. And yeah, a lot of good games. I'm trying to think like interesting lists. There's an E-Ray Akbar Padawan deck that I played in the first round. That deck was pretty cool. I went all in on Akbar in case he tried to do any sort of leadership shenanigans. And after the game, I told him I did that, and he told me he didn't have leadership in the deck. So got me. But yeah, overall, the event was great. Because the turnout was so good, they threw in bonus prizes. So I walked away with a Kylo Ren playmat, which was pretty cool. And yeah, I'm eager to play more with those guys. And it was cool to see just that level of turnout. Like, I teased everyone because my latest local event only had 13. I was like, where were you people? You know, but yeah, it's fun. It's cool to see like just how big it is out here, and yeah, it was great.
I think it's interesting that there's a lot of Django Veers in the meta, but they're not winning these tournaments.
Well, you have to remember that's like it's a very easy deck to make. Mm-hmm. It's like step one. I mean, like a lot of people have like Veers dice rolling around, and like that only goes in that deck. So if you're someone with Veers and you don't want to make Django Veers, I know a lot of people who just don't value that card. Then they're like, well, here, you can make a Django Veers deck. Like, I do know that's kind of like the genesis of it. And it's one of those weird things. Like, you have to be careful if you're... It's one of the funniest things I hear that people say, like, aggro is brain dead. In order to play aggro well, you just have to know the cost of every decision you make, because literally every action, it takes longer for you to win the game. The game usually gets exponentially harder for you to win just based on like the design of how quickly you burn through resources and trying to get stuff on the table, and how often you go for damage over defense. And I mean, you can play aggro more mid-range and defensively, but everyone says it's easy to play aggro, but it's just as hard to play aggro well in some cases as it is to play control. So do be careful. If you do play a lot of aggro and you still feel like you're having a lot of trouble, like talk to your friends and, you know, let them see if they can tell you, like, if you're not handling your action economy well. One thing aggro super needs is battlefield control. One of the things I feel like I eke out advantage a lot using my Ebala Django deck is I can actually contest the battlefield much more reliably than when I had Phasma, and I do feel like that leads to just much more punishing scenarios where I can roll out Bala first, then my opponent like has to fiddle around with deciding if they want to, you know, do the delay and not let me do Django, which lets me equip more equipment or throw on more backup muscle damage or whatever. Like, I've been playing people who've been trying to do the stall tactic against Django or make me swing first, but that just gets my trooper out, my Bala out, and then I just sometimes just roll Django anyway, and now all that range damage is available. Or my favorite is just, if you're just going to stall, I'll just Tactical Mastery and roll Django the same way he would go anyway and hit you just as hard. So it's been fun.
And I wanted to comment about, there's been some discussion about the 35-minute Swiss pairing rounds. Some people have said this is too short. Some people have said, very negative things. In all the games we played 4 rounds with all these players. We never had a problem. there were people playing before and after the tournament, and none of those games got to 35 minutes. Did any of your games get close to that, Jay?
We had 3 games go to time total in 6 rounds. My RTO wanted to do 6 rounds of pure Swiss, and then just do strength of schedule. So it was kind of weird that, like, for the top table, it was decided on round 5, but we did round 6 anyway, and it was still fun. Like, I agree that that's a very good way of doing this, so it worked out. But only a couple matches went to time. Personally feel like I didn't watch these games specifically in most cases, but it seems like either decks that aren't 100% fully built, or when both players play like a little more defensively and that like no damage is getting through, that leads to like time disputes and to some degree a little bit of slow play. It is a tight window. It is interesting that watching my friend play Control, like he never went to time. So again, like just piggybacking on like what Chris Bates said and stuff, like it's not specifically like Control running into the wall. I just think it's like mid-range versus mid-range with a lot of good defense. Like, you know, some of the hero lists, I see them kind of getting bogged down and just trying to eke out that damage. And what's really crazy about a lot of the tiebreakers is it's often the difference of 1 damage or 1 health or 1 card. And that's kind of cool how like nail-bitey the game gets.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much of an issue with the 35-minute rounds. The tournaments that I've been to, we're finishing either well before or right at that point, and then very few go to the time limit. The one issue that I can see coming up is the top 4 or the first round of the cut going from 35 minutes to 90-minute best of 3, which essentially kind of, if you end up doing 3 turns, can lead to, if you even it out, 3 30-minute rounds. So that can be a little bit of an issue if you're used to playing at a 35-minute pace on a slow, grindy deck, then pairing up against another one of those slow, grindy decks to where now you have to play at a 30-minute pace just in case you don't win 2 games in a row. After that, the finals being 120 minutes is a little crazy.
Yeah, and our buddy Tiny, he did an event that did the top cut to 4, and you know, games weren't finishing in that 90-minute block, and it seemed really rough. And granted, it's a new format, and we haven't experienced it yet. You know, our locals are like doing different stuff, but you know, store champions are coming up, and that's how they're going to be run. I kind of agree holistically that like 90 is weird, and then 120 is like forever, and these like 4-hour, 5-hour like top 4s is kind of crazy. So we don't have an official opinion yet because like none of us have experienced it, but we sort of at this time kind of agree with Tiny that it's kind of strange. We're eager to hear more. If you listeners have like been to events that have used this top 4 cut system, like let us know if like your game's finished or how it went, or you know, we want more information before we like make a hard stance. But yeah, it's really interesting. And if you want to know more, like Tiny did like 2 videos I think now on it, so check him out.
All right, so with that being said, we are going to get to the new cards that were announced by Fantasy Flight. And Rick, go ahead and start us off, man.
All right, first off, we have Jen Urso, Reckless Operative. She is a hero yellow, rare, 11 hit points, cost 15 for 1 die, 20 at the elite. Dice sides are 2 ranged, 1 discard, 2 discard, 1 resource, and a blank, with the ability that says the cost of the first yellow event you play each round is decreased by 1. She really good dice. It's got everything that you want aggressively. 2 base, 2 damage sides, no resource costs anywhere on the dice, no modified, and then top that off with 11 hit points and making all your yellow events cheaper, which means 0 cost electroshocks, 0 cost disarms,
negotiate.
Yeah, 0 cost negotiate, playable reversal at 2 costs instead of 3, because that's the main drawback of that card being too expensive. So now it's very playable with Jen out. So I don't know if it makes you want to play 2 of her dice, or play her at elite or play her at single just for that ability and the huge health, but she definitely rivals Han right now, in my opinion.
So I find Jin interesting because she has two very reliable 2 damage sides, which is just a really good spread. And then she also has the 2 sides having discard 1 discard 1 2. And at first I saw her and I'm like, she's this weird hybrid damage control character. But honestly, like, one of the cool things is, like, a lot of control decks, still use damage to try and, like, maybe pop off one character to keep some of your dice off the table. And, some aggro lists, like, discard is good in, like, aggro and mid-range style gameplay of just your opponent gets a bad roll, you hit their hand, and now they just don't have the ability to discard. So she actually just sort of, like, slots into anything. Her point cost is a smidge high, I agree, but man, 2 damage range sides is really good. Her ability is very strong. Like, I'll go on record and say, like, I've never really liked Han. Like, I would, if you handed me her or Han, like, I would play her like 100 times to 1 probably. Yeah, I think Jin's really cool. Her effect's super good. We don't even know what yellow events are coming, both for hero and for neutrals. I mean, we got 1 coming up, but I'm saying, like, she's one of the things that the developers do is make great characters that grow with the game, and, like, she's someone that you're always going to look back to and be like, okay, so what does yellow do? Okay, what does it do with Jin? And that's really exciting.
I'm kind of 50-50 on her personally. My biggest complaint is her point cost, and it's actually more her elite cost, because with Han, his top is 18. So with that 12 points, you can fit a lot of options in. With 20 points at elite, at least at this point in time, which we're talking, we don't have any 10-point characters. So you're going to be looking at adding probably only 1 die to the team. So you would have 2 Jin Erso die, and then 1 of something else. And it's tough because, like, if you're looking at her from a control standpoint, we don't have a lot of 1 die characters that would synergize super well with her. And then if you're trying to talk about an aggro standpoint, we don't have another character who would just give you maximum amount of damage. And I'm saying this coming from, like, a Django Veer standpoint, where you can easily pump out like 8 damage on a god roll. With Jin and somebody else at elite, you're looking at maybe 6 max without equipment. So, like, she doesn't really fill in aggro super well, and she doesn't really fill in control super well. What I do like about, and of course, we've only seen 1 hero character out of the 24, so this could change very easily once the set is spoiled. I do love her dice sides. The damage is astronomically powerful. Like, 2 and 2, that's great, because most characters like 1, 2, and then like a +2 or a 2 damage for 1 resource, so she's really strong on both discard and damage, which I really like. Like, I do want to play Jin. My favorite thing about her is just that cost reduction is fantastic. One of our Patreons actually brought up this point. Jared has also named Smurley on our Discord channel. He was bringing up a fact that in Netrunner there was a prepaid Kate deck that would discount events by 1. And I remember playing with that. And just the ability to play cards at a discount period is very powerful. But the nice thing is most of the yellow removal and control cards in the game at this point cost 1. So like you were saying, negotiation for 0, electroshock for 0. These are very powerful options that you really are looking at 3 resources in your pool now, because you can play a turn 1 electroshock for free, and then, or, whatever for free. And then you still have 2 resources that you can spend on other things like equipment, other events, other dice mitigation, other things. And so it makes her really unpredictable. And I like that a lot about cards, because people aren't always contemplating the fact that you have access to 3 resources worth of cards now with Jin on the field.
Yeah, it gets around that first turn, that choice that you have to make of whether you're going to be playing dice mitigation cards or building up your dice pool. So you can do both with Jin. You can play, like you were saying, play out a holdout blaster or something, or a 2-cost blaster, and still be able to have electroshock or negotiate on standby in case you need it, instead of having to hope to then roll another resource on one of your dice sides.
And I think at her 15 costs too, like, listening to what you said, Sudio, like, yeah, you're kind of right. For some reason, I don't know, I look at Han and I just think he's more expensive than he is, but Jin's probably overall better as a single die, but as we see more options and something she can pair with, maybe, like one of the guys we're talking about today is Death Trooper. He costs 10. Maybe heroes also get like a parallel. Who knows? And maybe that'll team up really well with her. But I think she's really cool, and exactly in the scenario that Rick mentioned. Like when I'm playing, my Ebolitic Django deck, there's a lot of times where I just don't play Jetpack because I only have 2 resources, and as strong as Jetpack can be, I'm still sitting on a flank or a best defense in my hand, and I try to be safer and push with discard than I do with like spending all my resources early. And Jin can slap on a Jetpack and still, electroshock you, and that's phenomenal. So yeah, she's pretty awesome.
I do agree with you. Yeah, Jetpack Jin, calling it. I do agree. I think I would rather have her over a Han. And this comes from like understanding game mechanics, and people might disagree, but the thing with Han is, in order for his effect to trigger, you must spend resources and you must play cards, and they have to be yellow and they have to have ambush. So all of these, well, they don't have to be yellow, but the 3 requirements are: you have to spend resources, they have to have ambush, and you have to play a card. With Jin, you only need one of those things. You just have to play a card. You don't necessarily need resources, and it doesn't need ambush. And so she is always online, and people will look at Han and anticipate you're going to play ambush like crazy to get those shields. People are going to look at Jin and like turn 1, say, you're running Finn, so you have access to the F11D. So turn 1, you stick an F11D rifle on her. They may or may not remember that she has her effect because you're out of resources, and they think, oh, you have no resources, so I can do whatever I want, and you have no ability to play dice mitigation, which is not true. And that makes her extremely powerful, because with Han, you know how it's going to work. Like if they don't have resources, they're not going to be able to get shields. With Jin, if you don't have resources, you can still do things. And so you have to play around her, knowing your opponent could be sitting on multiple options that you don't have to pay anything for. So I like her a lot. I really do.
You do have to watch out for playing a 0-cost yellow event as your first event, though, as it still reduces the cost of that first event. So just keep in mind that.
Yeah, don't do that.
I mean, if you have to, you have to.
I mean, if you have to, yeah, but try not to.
But don't get cocky, right?
Don't be too unpredictable.
Yeah, basically. So, yeah, I think Jin is very, very strong and a lot of fun. So we'll see what else comes out, but I have high hopes for her. And it's nice. She's a rare, so she should be quite more accessible to get to than, obviously a Han. So the next card is, of course, in Blue Villain, which is my 2 favorite components of this game, and that is the Emperor himself, Palpatine, the Galactic Emperor. This is a legendary rare. He has 15 health. His cost to play for 1 die is 21 points. His cost for 2 dice is 28 points. So this is a one-man team. So be aware, if you get this card, you're not going to be able to play much of anything else if you run him elite. His die faces are 2 range damage, 3 range damage, 2 discard, 2 shields, 1 resource, 1 blank. And his special effect states, after you resolve this die, force an opponent to deal 2 damage to their characters distributed as they wish. So a couple things. If you run Elite Palpatine, this effect triggers for both of his dice, because it's when you resolve this die. So each die is an iteration of his effect triggering. The damage that's being dealt can be blocked by shields, and the damage that's being dealt can be distributed, similar to the F11D rifle. So it's not unblockable, and it's not damage you get to pick. Your opponent can, soak shields or stick it on their weak character. They can do whatever they want. But Palpatine has a lot of great options. So on a God roll, he can deal 6 damage with his 3 ranged, and then an additional 4 damage. So spread out, of course, you could deal 10 damage with Palpatine for no resources, no cards equipped to him, no nothing. And, I mean, it's not bad. The couple thoughts I have on him, first of all, is once again, similar to Jin, we've only seen a few cards from the set. So we don't know what the support cards are. We don't know the event cards. We don't know, equipment, abilities. We don't know anything like that. So just looking at him right now in this point in the timeline of the game, it's really rough to play him because there's a lot of ways to get rid of his dice. Even if you took him at 2, there's Negotiate, You can get rid of 2 of his dice. There's the best defense. You can get rid of 2 of his dice. Prized possession is an option. It's really expensive, but it is a way to hurt him really bad. You know, you can flank him easily, considering once he's tapped out, your opponent has nothing untapped. So even if you're running a 2-character list and you see Palpatine, you can flank him real fast. There's just so many ways to turn off those dice that I'm not totally sure how he's going to work at the moment. Just realistically, because removal is in everyone's deck. Like, anyone I play, with the exception of maybe Jango Veers, has fairly strong event suites with removal. Jango Veers should run some, but it's not going to be nearly as consistent as other decks. But the point I'm saying is, you can shut off Palpatine turn 1 and turn 2 fairly quickly, and that's really rough for a single character with 15 HP.
Yeah, it's the 15 health is what kills him for me. I really would love to play him as a single character and just be throwing, Force Lightnings that we'll get to and stuff out at people. But 15 health is so low. So unless they come out with something that in this set that has a similar effect to Second Chance for Hero Yellow, it's going to be really hard to keep him alive. I mean, he's going to want to go in a deck that has very little upgrades because he can only hold 3. He's going to want a lot of events that probably are going to cost resources, and that's one of the things he's not good at is generating resources. So you kind of want to be able to, the first couple turns, load him up with upgrades and then ride out any kind of damage that you can be dealing to him. But again, until they come out with something that either like Field Medic from Red, Hero Red, or Second Chance, like I was saying, it's going to be hard to keep him alive long enough to actually win with him.
Something I'm just tired of experiencing, because I've been playing in like mostly range decks. Like, you know, you look at Palpatine, it's like, oh man, he has a 3 range side. That's so juicy. That's 2 damage back to your face if you eat a deflect, which is like not great. That's really, really frustrating. And so that like on its own makes his health even seem smaller to me, just because how many times, like, I swear everyone's decks has 20 deflects like all the time. And
yeah, and that what's worse is that's 5 damage that they're mitigating and dealing you 2 as well.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he's cool. I don't think all hope is lost necessarily, but it's hard to tell. We don't know what's coming. You know, there's something to be said that they just wanted to release like just this crazy, almost like raid boss style character that's neat and fun, and, you know, just like as design space. And it's tricky too, because, you know, the arguments of like maybe he has really great support, but you have to wonder, is that great support like just better for him, or does it also make, you know, all the other blue we already have, or the rest of the blue characters in set 2 better too? Like, can it somehow, you know, be better for Palpatine and not great for Vader? That kind of stuff. But again, like, I think it's a really cool card, and everybody who says like, why is he 28? He should just be rounded up to 30. I mean, the way like these characters are designed are like within a point cost system, and I mean I just think the answer is like, yeah, you can speculate that there's going to be, I've heard people say like upgrades that cost starting points and battlefields that cost starting points, and like, I don't rule those out. Those would be really cool. And obviously the squad point system is a way to like expand, you know, into like interesting design areas. But I just think he just costs 28 because he costs 28 and he's not a 30-point guy. And, you know, we don't know who's coming later. Like, maybe Snoke after episode 8, maybe he's the 30 coster. We don't know what he does, but I don't rule out that, you know, there's a possibility where something costs 1 to 2 points, but I just think he's 28 costs because he's 28 costs, and that's fine, and that's cool. And, you know, at best he is good, and, you know, hooray, and at worst he's a legendary you don't have to hunt for very hard. You know, and I mean, like, and I still think he's cool. I still think he's fun, and there's going to be games. I mean, there's games where you don't draw the right removal. Like, 2 card lists aren't going to run flank because Palpatine's running around, unless Palpatine is the it deck. But even then, like, it's still goofy to run flank in a two list. And, you know, I've definitely played enough games where, like, in my hero list, like, I didn't see my negotiate. So he gets to, like, resolve and hit pretty hard and, like, make a dent. I mean, yeah, you know, it goes both ways. Like, it's a dice game. Anything can happen. And I want to say this, if you're excited for Palpatine, be excited for Palpatine and play him, you know, like, have fun and, you know, experience it for yourself and see what it takes. Like, obviously, you know, don't let everyone, like, rain on your parade if everyone's saying he sucks. Like, it's tricky, you know, like, there's a lot of signs pointing to it's gonna be a hard uphill battle, but I still think he's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for Palpatine. I want to play Palpatine, but I'm not going to win Worlds with Palpatine, right? I understand that.
You don't know that.
Well, just to piggyback off of what Jay was saying, if they make cards that go to help Palpatine stay alive, that just makes all the other cheaper blue characters that much more staying power. Like, if you can imagine them making something to where he can get shields every turn, what does that do to Dooku? Like, it makes Dooku nigh unkillable at that point. And that's the problem, right? They can't just design a card that's good to make Palpatine work because they have other blue characters that are already hard to kill.
I do want to say a couple of things I like about Palpatine. I too want to try and make him work. The nice thing is, and this is interesting because a lot of people, when I tell them this, are like, oh, okay, that does make Palpatine better. Every single die face, except for the blank, is 2 damage plus something else. So you're guaranteed, obviously, once again, without the blank, if you have a die face that's not a blank, you're going to deal 2 damage. And so that does make him kind of scary. Once again, 15 health is very, very squishy for an entire deck with one character. But you have this piece of knowing that if you resolve 2 shields, you still deal damage. If you get a resource, you still deal damage. If you roll damage, it's even more. The nice thing is he's always online. Like, Palpatine will always deal damage unless you roll a blank. And so it's really, really nice that everything he does is towards the, you know, end game of killing your opponent faster.
Also, don't forget the possibility that, like, Palpatine could come out of the gate. If he can roll out his dice and, like, get a 2 or a 3 side on the word go, nothing's stopping him from, like, no mercy turn 1 for an insane amount of damage that might pop off one of your weaker guys and just get the ball rolling. I mean, I've seen some really early no mercy plays from, like, Chud and so on to just, like, soften, and, you know, things like that are possible. We don't know what else is coming.
Yeah, I mean, you roll 3 damage, you no mercy turn 1, you've done 7 damage to a character, or 7 damage to one character, and 2 to another. Like, you are already winning the race, right? It's now you may have killed a single character off. If you got the other 2 damage, you probably definitely killed another character off. So it's definitely doable.
Yeah, I agree. Palpatine has a lot of potential. And the big thing that makes me excited is if they're going to put out a character of this nature and just astronomical potential damage. You know, when we interviewed Lucas, he was saying they're going to be a little bit more unbound. I have high hopes that there's going to be some really strong cards to make Palpatine just shine. And yes, it is true that you can tack those on to other characters, but I feel like some of them will be very good with him as opposed to they'll be kind of decent with other characters who aren't Palpatine. So I have high hopes. I'm excited to get my hands on him and play him out, and we'll just have to see what the rest of the set has for the Emperor himself to control the Galactic Empire. But anyways, moving on, we have Jay's favorite director, and I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about this card.
So when we talked to Lucas in our interview, and we said, like, man, you know, set 1 is, like, really awesome, and you've created some really interesting characters and effects already, and, like, can't imagine what's coming in set 2. And Lucas told us, like, we haven't seen anything yet. Director Krennic is definitely an exemplary example of what I'm sure he was trying to imply, because Krennic is amazing. So just looking at the card, he has 12 health. He costs 15-19 as far as point cost goes. His die is 2 ranged, 1 focused, 2 disrupt, 2 discard, 1 resource, and a miss. And his crazy effect is if you control the battlefield after you activate Director Krennic, you can also roll into your pool a Death Trooper die. And what this is trying to say is you don't have to have a Death Trooper like with you in your squad. You have to own a Death Trooper card and the subsequent die and, have it with you to play him, which, you can say like that's frustrating and weird that one card like requires another to fully be playable, but as far as design space goes, like legendaries aren't necessarily meant to be made to be the most powerful so much as they usually are the design space to be interesting, break the rules, and like don't play like other cards do. And Krennic is definitely a perfect example of this. And so you get to roll in a Death Trooper die, which if we very quickly look at Death Trooper, he's a 10 cost, 10 health, red non-unique that has 1 range, 2 range, +2 range, 1 disrupt, and a miss. So it's a 4 damage side die you get to roll into your pool. 3 of its sides have, they're just, I call them starters, like they start the damage chains, and then you add modifiers. So like, he pairs with nearly anything. Half his die will do damage reliably on its own. It is and it isn't in your opponent's best interest to try to remove that die because, it didn't necessarily cost you anything to have it, but they also can't ignore it, and it makes your upgrades more reliable, and it's just, it's so cool and so good. And so now, people wonder and ask, like, was he worth it? Like, can you like guarantee that you get the battlefield? And on paper right now, like I'll admit, like, one of his weaknesses is he has such a cool varied die, but part of that versatility also means that technically he kind of resolves a little slower, and that can suck. But one of the things that I think is like one of the best aspects of Destiny, I think my honest favorite mechanic is the battlefield and choosing when to take it and like how that affects this turn, next turn, what options do you have from fresh rolls, and like do you have cards in your hand that you can activate next turn, and just all the versatility and decision making made around battlefields now being even more impactful. Being the Krennic player, playing against Krennic, do you undercut your turn really short to keep Krennic from getting that die, which then a Krennic player could then like safely play out the rest of his cards and effects and maybe do something completely other horrible to you, which I think is intentionally part of his design. Like, yeah, that Death Trooper die is great, but putting that pressure on your opponent and sort of changing the rules of the match, I think is inherently part of his strategic, point. And God, he's so fascinating to me. Like, just, as a game designer myself, like looking at a card like this, I'm just blown away at the the options and the way that he both makes the game more interesting and bends the rules, and hopefully there's some support for him in the set that maybe makes him more reliable or gets more benefits from claiming, or who knows. It's kind of like Palpatine. Like, I think, like, if I could play Krennic right now, I would, because I think he's super cool. You can like team up with Bala Teak and get 4 dice, and then take the battlefield and get 5. Like, that's crazy. Or you can even just team up with a Death Trooper and just have even more like reliable damage to pair off of it. And there's a ton of other options. You can run 1 die Krennic with like Trooper and a Night Sister right now, and you still, again, having the battlefield shores up that missing die, which is crazy. You almost in a way, if you have the battlefield, I wouldn't say like you get 10 bonus points because you don't get the health, but I would say like that die is worth like 5 fuzzy bonus squad points when you have the battlefield, which is not like nothing to sneeze at. So I love Krennic. I'm excited. I want to play him right now. I think Death Trooper is super exciting too. I know a lot of people are like already imagining like triple Death Trooper lists, which sounds neat, but I just can't not look at Krennic. Like, I practically had a nosebleed when I read him. I thought he was so awesome, and I'm just blown away. He's phenomenal. What do you guys think?
I think that he is well designed, just like you were saying, but kind of breaking the rules a little bit, but not in an overbearing way. His die sides are kind of, it's a little bit of everything. So he can go into really any deck that you want to put him in. He doesn't have a whole lot of damage on his own. He does have, a 2 range side, but it's only 1 side on his dice. Getting 2 dice, pairing him with Balatik, you're starting with 4 dice that have native focus on them. So you're very consistent in what you want to do with that. And I think the biggest thing that this is that you're making your opponent, if they win the roll at the start of the game, are they going to give you or let you use your battlefield and give you 5 potential dice at the start of the game before anything happens, or are you going to get some shields almost every time? So now you can play stuff like Balatik with him and start off with, instead of having 21 health, you have effectively 23 health. Or sorry, instead of 20 health, you have 22 health. Things like that. And the Death Trooper die itself, it doesn't have any resources. That's its one little drawback there. So you're not really ramping into anything either by being able to have this free die. So I think it's a very well designed card. I think he is going to be something that you're going to see a lot of in casual and in tournaments. He's no pay sides on there, no modified sides on his dice. He is a very solid all-around character.
Also, he's a absolutely fantastic target for Commanding Presence, a card that I really super love, but even in like the best lists that I've tried to run Phasma in, it still just doesn't quite synergize in every way that I would enjoy. But slapping it on Krennic, boosting any of Krennic's sides by +2 can be like devastating, or boosting that, Death Trooper die. Like, I think Commanding Presence like synergizes absolutely phenomenally with him. Yeah, there's just so much good I could say about this card. Like, I'm ecstatic.
I really like Director Krennic for a lot of reasons. You guys have covered most of them. I've been learning more and more, and we even said this when the game started. The more dice you roll as you play Destiny means a much higher percentage of win because of the velocity of dice. You're getting more numbers, you're getting more options, you're getting more things to do. And Director Krennic is he's a different version of Jabba. In fact, if you add those extra 5 fuzzy points you were talking about, Jay, he actually goes from 11 to 14 that Jabba is to his 15 to 19. So I don't think that that's an incorrect statement, that they kind of accounted for him potentially rolling an extra die, costing him in that direction. My favorite thing about him is actually his 12 points of HP, because that is a very difficult number to reach. He's the only character other than Luke Skywalker we've seen at that number.
Poe.
And oh, I'm sorry, you're correct, and Poe. So there's very few characters in that threshold of 13 and 12. So he's very tanky. He's very flexible. And with all the red cards we've seen, there's all kinds of action economy. There's ways to cheat your turns where you can, play your cards faster, play your dice faster, do all kinds of things. So there's great potential for this deck to take the battlefield. But the first thing I thought about was, how do I pair Elite Krennic? Who do I pair it with? Balatik is not a bad option. Like you said, there's 4 focus sides of the 4 focus die. If you run elite teams, you can max out, if you have the battlefield, you can max out with 10 damage for no resources, and that's not including adding any kind of equipment. So if you added a F11D rifle or, a DH-17 or something, at this point, with all the weapons and guns we've seen, your maximum damage potential with a gun is 12 damage, which is very likely to trigger Balatik to untap him, and you could deal an additional 6 damage at max. So a god roll turn would be 12 and 6, 18 damage. That's a lot of damage. Now, of course, that's not going to be as consistent since Director Krennic only has 1 side of damage. But, these are things to consider. And like you said, the design space is really interesting because say you roll Krennic and you only get, discards. That's still 4 cards you're getting rid of. Or if you get, the Jabba roll where it's like a half, 2 discard, 2 disrupt, that's still the entire turn of resources. So now your opponent has to play cards and they have to spend resources, which you can then spend the 2 discard to get more cards out of their hand. It's just, he's so flexible in doing things that aren't necessarily pure damage. and that makes him really, really powerful to me because he's never not doing something you want, and I love it.
Yeah, you kind of touched on that if you're going to get disrupt, having 2 disrupt is the way to be, right? It forces them to do stuff whenever you roll that.
Yeah, and after your opponent, if they take the battlefield from you, and they're sitting on bonus resources, you blow them up. Like, that happens a lot. That's one of the best punishes of, like, losing, like, next turn initiative is, like, taking out their hand or taking out if they have resources left over. Like, that's somewhere he can hit you. So he has that strategist vibe, like, down to the T, like, Cruel But Brilliant. It's such a good title. It's so good. He also... One thing I noticed that's kind of subtle about him is that he's actually pretty solid at winning the initiative roll, depending on what you pair him with, but he has 3 2-sides. The only other characters that kind of boast numbers like that, like we got Han with the 2-3-2, we got Vader with the 2-3-2, we got Grievous with the 2-2-3.
Luke.
But like, isn't Luke's 2-3-1? His bonus side is focus.
Yeah,
that's true.
So Krennic has 3 2-sides, that's a good average. That's strong for trying to get that early roll at the beginning of the game. So, like, again, like, he's not the best, but I feel like that's intentionally part of his design, and it's cool that he has 3 2-sides, which are good for that initial roll starting the game off. And yeah, even again pairing it with the Death Trooper, it's another 2 sides. Like, I don't know, I think it's great. I think as a very cool little flavor nudge, I like that the set symbol is a Death Star. Because if you look at his card, it says, like, roll the Death Trooper die, and then it shows the set number, which is 1 Death Star. Also, Death Trooper, Death Star. He seems to have a theme. Yeah, Krennic, like, 10 out of 10. Like, I'm going to get it. I'm going to hunt Lucas down and Corey and everyone and get that signed, because that's just... far and away my favorite card of the game now, and like I'm gonna be excited to see what like can top him in design. But right now, like, he's just one of the best explorations of the systems of this game. So bravo.
All right, a few other cards that we saw. We talked about the Death Trooper, but let's kind of go over him real quick. 10 health, 10 HP, 1 ranged, 2 ranged, +2 modified ranged, 1 disrupt, blank. A lot of people have been talking about running a triple Death Trooper squad where you've got 30 points, 30 health, and, you can deal 6 damage, and it's very consistent at maximum 6 damage without any kind of guns equipped. What do you guys think? Because the Death Trooper is pretty straightforward. It's a reliable shooting character and not much else.
For that point cost, it's great. I mean, I like him a lot. I do think Triple Trooper is probably a list to, like, be mindful of. 30-point health is a ton. They kind of activate fairly quickly, so again, like, their damage is so reliable. It only takes like a few DH-17s or F-11Ds, and they're already punching you hard, and then they can activate quick and take the battlefield and dug in and suddenly have a ton of shields. Or as long as you're not playing against too heavy a disrupt, which we're starting to see a little more already, but who knows. But I mean, like, you can even just ride their damage like vanilla, save some money, and then like Endless Ranks the first one that dies, and then boom, 10 more health. Like, holy cow. So yeah, I think Death Troopers are awesome, and another just really cool slot. I do hope Heroes get, something like nearly as juicy. And I mean, Heroes already have like really cool guys. Like, everybody, like, I'm impressed more and more by Padawan, like, every day. Obviously, 7 health isn't 10 health. Yeah, I think Death Troopers are going to be pretty popular for a while, and they're definitely worth that 10.
Yeah, Padawan definitely had one of the best dice in the game until this came out. So, I mean, most consistent, I should say. The fact that it doesn't have that the Death Trooper doesn't have a resource side limits it a lot, and that will be the one weakness of a 3 Death Trooper squad is they're not going to have a lot of resources. But then they get stuff like, drudge work, and most of the weapons also have a resource side on it. So you just get through that initial push of loading up your weapons or your supports, and then you can make it through there. But then fighting them on the disrupt angle in order for them to not be able to ever have a chance of endless rakings. Another 10 health back is going to be key.
Do keep in mind, though, actually, not a lot of guns make resources. I keep making that mistake when I, play my current deck and try to, focus a DH-17 or a holdout blaster. Those have shields. They don't have, resources. Right. F11 has money on it. Which is, again, F11 still probably best weapon in the game, in my opinion, on just a lot of fronts. But, actually, they're choked out with a lot of their good gun choices. We don't know what's coming in this set that might help in that regard, but, yeah, it's kind of tricky and crazy. Although, they're fun to promotion. Promotion makes money.
That's true. That's very true. So, Death Troopers, pretty good. We'll see what else they get in the support category, but yeah, I think they definitely have a future with, once again, not everybody wants to run super hyper expensive legendary filled decks, and Triple Trooper, 30 HP, 3 dice, consistent damage. It's pretty good. You don't need to go hunting for an entire set to run a very strong and very competent deck. So let's take a look at the Rebel Assault card. This is a red hero event. It's 0 cost. The card says, play only if you have 1 or more dice showing ranged damage. And that's modified or base. Remove an opponent's die not showing ranged damage. Remove an opponent's die not showing damage. It can be ranged or it can be melee. What are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, it's free. Red hero does have a few range damage sides, not on their characters themselves. They're all ranged characters. There's no melee yet. So plus you add in the fact that you got all the supports and other weapons and things that are geared toward range on heroes. The likelihood of you having a range damage side showing is pretty high.
I think it's cool, the way this card's worded. And so far it's the only one we've seen, but I'm going to make a little bit of a reach here and think that this, check to see if you have range side might be, a new spot. So it's interesting. I like the design space of, if you're showing this, then you can activate this card as a different way of affecting the cost of it. Because, again, this card could have just been, pay 1, do the same effect, and not have the range side, but having the range check, I think, is a really cool and unique way of balancing, and I hope we see more cards like this. Also, another card we're about to talk has another, conditional trigger. So, for an expansion, mindset, I think this is one of the ways that they're exploring, new ways to trigger and state-based effects and stuff. So I think this card's neat, just in the idea that I'm suspecting this is gonna be a new spotlight effect.
I just like the fact that red is getting some removal because they really don't have much. The best part is it's 0 cost. Red just eats through their resources for tricks, guns, and action economy. And so the ability to you're going to have ranged dice showing. And so now for free, you can get rid of anything that's not damaged. So you're looking at a special effect, you're looking at card removal, your opponent's going to make a bunch of resources, all kinds of things. You can start to snipe away their options, and you still get to retain your damage on the board. So I feel that this is going to be a very popular card for red decks just because they have it hard enough for removal, and this is going to help fill in a lot of gaps for them. And it's a common, so it's not going to be really difficult to get your hands on this.
Yeah, it's the only issue is not showing damage, removing the dice that doesn't show damage, but it doesn't mean that you can't get rid of a blank side on a dice that you're worried about them re-rolling or being able to focus into to do a lot of damage. So, if if your opponent has a Vader die on blank and they have a focus showing from a hologron or something, and you can go ahead and preemptively get that out of there.
All right, the next card that was released in the announcement was Your Eyes Can Deceive You, and that was, in fact, the title of one of our episodes. It is a blue hero card. This is an uncommon, 1 resource cost. This is a support that states after one of your dice rolls a shield, you may exhaust this support to turn an opponent's die to any side. Wow. This is a control card that sits out on the field. So this is a viable target for, what's that red removal? Surgical Strike. I mean, this is nasty because I've been trying to make Qui-Gon decks work, and it's very tricky. But right now, with this card, like, he rolls shields frequently because he's got 2 shield sides, and you can usually stick, like, Force Protection on. Or if you're running, say, Diplomatic Immunity, like, you're getting shields and you're getting rid of die faces you don't want to deal with. I don't see a reason why this shouldn't go into a lot of decks in the future.
So this is the other card I was referring to, where it's got a conditional of it. What's cool is make sure you've like read this card correctly, because it says after one of your dice rolls a shield, it's not a resolution. It doesn't matter if you use the shield; it just had to turn up, and then you can trigger and exhaust the support to activate it, which is super cool. Again, like exploring design space and other ways of like interacting with the game and how like mechanics work. I like, it interacts with the dice. This whole game is a dice game, so I think that's super cool. You just gotta be careful and like get used to having these types of cards in play. It's the only thing that's like a little hazy on it for me. Is just like, okay, so now they're looking out for, I mean, you'll get used to cards the more you see them, but this card style has a slight chance of delaying the game a little, of just like, oh wait, did I roll a shield? I can do this. But I'm not saying that's like, it's not bad. It's just it's a new way that cards interact with the game, and more reactive triggers, and that's cool. Just more stuff to be mindful of. But I think it's a very cool card. I'm eager to see again, both with like, are your dice showing X, or after you roll Y, things happen, because again, I think these are both cool.
Yeah, some that Hero Blue needed was a little bit more die mitigation, and they're really focused on the shields as it is, so just getting an added benefit of doing something you're most likely doing anyway is great. But it does only just turn it to either a blank, or on some of those dice that don't have blanks, to their whatever you can think of their worst side. Still mitigating a little bit of damage, possibly making them discard to reroll, or using effects to change their dice back.
And also, it's just neat in that, like, this card benefits you whether you wanted the shield or not. So, like, in a perfect world, they rolled, like, Vader rolled his 3, and you roll out, and you didn't get damage, but you rolled the shield, and now Vader has a miss, so he has, -3 damage, and you prevented that damage, and you could get a shield, which like flips it. It's almost kind of like how Jetpack works when it like knocks out a die. Like not like a 1-to-1 comparison, but just how like being able to like not only reduce their damage but also gain defense. So it's just neat. Like, it's good whether you want it or not, which I think is what makes the card like super awesome. If you're looking for shields and you roll it, great. And if you're not, well, you gave yourself like a little bit of breathing room.
A couple things I really like about this card: it targets any of your dice, so it's not, this isn't an equipment, this is a support card, so it sits in the back row. So anything, like if you roll a BB-8 and you get a shield, this can proc it. If you stick an equipment on somebody and, that rolls a shield, you can proc it. My favorite thing about this effect is that it's a 2-for-1, because you're taking an action, but you also have the potential to resolve dice mitigation alongside that action. The problem with heroes right now is you really only get to do like one thing per turn. You roll your dice, your opponent rolls their dice. So now you can either mitigate, or you can resolve, or do something else, but you don't really get to do both. And this card allows you to do both. And that's really powerful because heroes need time to set up. They're very mid-rangey combo built. And so this gives them that extra oomph they need, so that you can roll shields, you can remove dice, and now you can be prepared for something. So if you need to reroll that shield, that's fine. You still got use out of the die face itself. If you want to spend the action to resolve shields upon your characters, that's also fine. It gives you the flexibility you need and the sustain that heroes desperately need to stay alive long enough to start dishing out all kinds of nasty things to their opponents. So I'm really excited. I think this card will be great. You can, once again, just like It Binds All Things, if you roll a single shield and you have 2 of these cards out, you can proc 2 Your Eyes Can Deceive You off of 1 shield face. So you could, in one turn, turn 2 dice to sides you don't want to deal with. So it's good. It's really good.
Yeah, and the blue hero does have one of the best dice mitigation cards in the game in Force Misdirection, but it's slow. It's not something that you can easily react to what your opponent is doing. And this kind of gives you a little bit of a buffer there that, you know, after you have this on the field, if they roll something bad, you always have a chance of rolling a shield. You know, if you're building your deck, of course, you're going to have shields if you're running this. So you always have a chance to be able to at least slow down that damage or get rid of that special or what have you. Whereas with Force Misdirection, you have to either have a bunch of dice in the pool already when they roll, or you got to kind of hope that they're waiting to build up a large alpha strike with, like if you're looking to get rid of their melee damage, you have to hope that they won't resolve that damage on their next turn if you don't have any dice in your pool yet. So this kind of gives you a way to slow that effect down a little bit, whereas Force Misdirection, you kind of have to really work hard to get that to do what you want it to do.
All right, our second to last card that came out is Never Tell Me the Odds. This is a yellow hero, uncommon, 3 resource cost. With Jyn Erso, it can be 2, but we won't get now. The effect is choose one of your yellow characters, turn any number of its character and upgrade dice to sides of your choice. The first time I saw this card, I immediately thought of Infamous, because if you play this for 3 and you don't resolve those die faces without ambush, you're setting yourself up for all kinds of mitigation you don't want to deal with. And that's my personal thought, because the way the meta is, at least in what I've played, if you do something like this, your opponent generally has some kind of mitigation they've been sitting on, and so you flip your dice to sides you want, and then they turn off the things you desperately need. But if you can ambush this out, you know, especially if you're playing it with Han, you know, it's a picture of Han, C-3PO, and Leia and the Falcon. You know, you get a shield off of Han, you can turn your dice to whatever sides you want, and you still have that ambush extra action. You can resolve them. That is really nasty. I mean, what do you guys think about this?
Yeah, you got into it. It's an expensive effect. If you're not doing it with Infamous, you're opening yourself up to even getting disturbance in the Force. You know, they just make you re-roll everything. It's really hard to justify this if you're not running Infamous and you don't have Infamous out. And I honestly probably would never pay 3 for this effect, where, you know, all in is very similar to what you're looking to do here with this, but you got to have focus sides on it. But that's essentially what you're trying to do here, is trying to focus all of your stuff into what you want and resolve it at once. But giving the opponent the option or the ability to have a turn to try and deal with it is what brings us down, let alone the 3 costs that is a little more than what I would want to pay for it.
Yeah, so I looked at this card, and I think it's neat, and I see the dream combo everyone's talking about of, like, Infamous this, or Jyn Infamous this, or whatever. And, like, I think it's cool, but it's hard to get excited for. I've tested a lot with Infamous. I don't like running the card, even when I've ran decks that are pure yellow, because the later you see it, the less useful it is. And, I mean, the dream is to have an opening hand and discard for everything, but it feels like such a staple that a lot of times the ambush nature of the effect didn't necessarily like stem the tide of that round. I mean, it's impactful and it's a good card if you like to run it. I don't see it as like the reason to like run a card or run a deck, especially one that costs so much. Like, you know, it's a dream scenario. It's kind of like build your own god roll in a way. And that's cool, but I don't know. You also have to have upgrades already on the character in order for this to really truly matter, and that's extra turns, extra, you know, like, it just makes it so, like, you have to delay this further, and, yeah, it's just hard. I don't know. It's not enough for me. I do think it's cool, and for those, like, combo crazy people out there that want to make these, like, 6 explosive turns like that, like, that's awesome. That's just not how I play.
Okay, the last card we've all been waiting to talk about, because this is a ridiculous card, and I'm so excited about it, and I'm just absolutely in love with it from the moment I saw it. It's Force Lightning. This is a villain blue legendary rare 4 resource upgrade ability. The die faces are 2 range damage, 3 range damage for 1 resource, 4 range damage for 1 resource, a special, a blank. The upgrade ability says blue character only, and the special effect is deal 1 damage to a character. You may remove a die showing a blank to reroll this die instead of removing it from your pool. So, first things first, this has 5 damage sides. Oh my gosh, that is ridiculous. True, 2 of them you have to pay for, but that's... who cares? You can holocron this onto whoever you want. Obviously, this has a picture of the Emperor using his Force Lightning, so you could stick this on the Emperor. Of course, this is the combo everyone's thinking, holocron, put Force Lightning on the Emperor. Now he can deal, 6 damage plus 4 for 1 resource on top of, his extra damage and all that kind of stuff. My favorite thing about this card actually is the special. Dealing 1 damage to a character, it's not unblockable, shields can eat it, but the special effect says you may remove a die showing a blank. That can be any die. That can be yours or your opponent's. So that's really powerful because you can deal damage and then you can remove a die and roll it again and potentially deal more damage, or you can just have a giant burst of 2, 3, or 4. 5 damage sides. I'd love to hear what you guys think because I love this card so much.
This is what everybody hopes out of Mind Probe, right? It's a ridiculous amount of damage. It has the Kylo's Saber, re-rolling it off the special ability similar to that, but it also gets rid of one of their dice. You got in Villain Blue, you got Feel Your Anger, possibly leaving them with a bunch of blanks anyway. You got Use the Force to turn cards to blanks. There's just so many ways. Immobilize to turn it to a blank. There's so many ways that you can put their dice to their blanks. And if you're sitting there with a special, now they're going to either re-roll on their turn, or they're going to let you get rid of that die, right? So I think the special is definitely one of the best things. It's not the 4 damage that you're looking at on this die, but it's definitely the best thing on this card.
I'm not as hyped as everyone else is on this card. I see that it's really expensive. I know Holocron's a thing, but I play a deck in the world that I mitigate Holocron all the time, so it's, you either there are god rolls, getting out on first turn, putting this on a Tusken Raider is probably really hilarious, as you see everything else fall onto that guy. I not this weekend but last, I got Mind Probe by a Tusken Raider. It happens. What I see is, again, range damage is not parity with melee, because again, you gotta be afraid to deflect. I see 2 sides of this that are just 3 sides of this that make deflect phenomenal. And again, not everyone's playing blue, and they don't always have it, but it makes me nervous. It really does. That's a lot of potential to get blown out trying to roll this good. 2 pay sides is nerve-wracking to me, because it's already an expensive card. You get a lot for it. It does hit hard, but it does screw up the rest of what you're trying to do. The 2 special sides, it's funny. You do have ways of causing blanks, and they're more likely to reroll their blanks, which I think is the thing that is kind of more interesting of them dumping cards in order to stabilize. That's super interesting to me, so that doesn't blow them out. But I kind of laugh that it's sort of it's a conditional black 1 special, and nobody likes black 1. So again, it's super powerful. It can be amazing. And yes, blue villain creates scenarios where misses happen. I'm not saying black 1's better than Force Lightning, but it's just things you have to consider. It's expensive, it's hard to play, it does chew through your resources to do well. Heavy cost cards always have that eggs in one basket nature, where you roll it out and then they mitigate it, and if you got it for free with Holocron, more power to you. But if you didn't, it's rough, paying for all that damage. Hopefully it's enough, hopefully it's what you need, but it's harder to combo off of things, again, No Mercies and things like that if you're not flush with resources. But I do think it's cool. I do think, it's going to win games. People are going to kick and scream and knock each other over to get this card, but I'm I see a lot of like well-designed balancing to it to keep it like, yeah, it's 5 damage sides, sure, but 2 of them only deal 1, which is still damage, but that might be all you get. Which is still 1's better than like a shield sometimes, but I'm just saying, like, just remember, like, it's easy to get caught up in the like, holy crap, this card's amazing, but there's a lot to it. It's very complicated, and it might like super heavy resource drain you in more ways than one, and it might not be the dream. You know, I've talked to a lot of people, and they're like, well, this card makes Mind Probe obsolete. I don't agree with that. I think they both do different things. Like Mind Probe, well, both of these cards actually make your opponent try to get rid of cards in their hand, which is kind of neat. I do think that's kind of a cool thing that Villain Blue pressures you on, especially with the blanks and the rerolls, and like both of these. I think Dex exists with both. I don't know if you run both, but I don't think this card just 100% trumps Mind Probe.
I mean, you're right that this is pretty much just blue villain, black 1, but I'm just going to list off reasons that it's better.
I'm not saying black 1's better, just to
repeat. Oh no, I know, but it's not even the same though, because for one, it's an upgrade, so it's better on the action economy. 2, it's got 2 special sides on it. 3, those specials also get rid of dice, and 4, holocron. But yeah, it's, if you're not crazy over black 1, but you're crazy over Force Lightning, you know, you're right. It's very similar. I'd be more worried about Force Throw against Force Lightning, getting that 4 range damage thrown back at my Emperor, who's now sitting at 11 damage, right? It's a lot of damage, and if things are going well, it's going to win you the game, but it can also turn it right back at you, like Mace Windu sitting over top of the Emperor, getting his face all burned up by lightning. But yeah, you are absolutely right. If you think that black 1 is crap, then you shouldn't be all about Force Lightning.
Yeah, I like this card a lot. And I have a couple things. So we are so thankful to all of our Patreons who have donated and been a part of our campaign. And we actually asked you guys to give us some of your thoughts about these new cards. And we have a couple posts here. So I wanted to read off Jeremy Shufflebarger. I hope I said that right. He said, I have 2 thoughts, or he likes 2 of the cards. His top pick is Director Krennic, also the most interesting character from Rogue One, and I love the actor. However, I feel like a triple Death Trooper deck is going to break the meta. And Force Lightning with Sith Holocrons. Are you kidding me? I think FFG loves them some villains. Also, Drew, I'm going to butcher your last name, Abnardo. He said, your eyes can deceive you seems really good. You don't even have to resolve a shield die, just roll one. Seems to be like some great control that's always on the board as a support. So thank you once again, everyone, all of our Patreons. We have tons of questions and posts we're going to be asking for your input as we go through the show here in 2017. So if you guys want to participate, if you want to give us input for content on future shows, we're going to post a link to our Patreon. But we've got all kinds of things happening, and we want the Patreon community to be a part of the show and the Knights of Ren. So with that being said, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for listening. This has been a great week for Star Wars Destiny. We've got a lot of cards to talk about. There's even more that we don't know the entirety. We've got, Supply Line, Personal Shield, Chirrut. There's all kinds of things that this new set is going to release, and we're just so excited about it. So thank you for listening. If you guys have been enjoying the show, check us out on Facebook at Knights of Ren Podcast. Like us on Twitter at KOR Podcast. We've got a YouTube channel. We've got Instagram. Once again, we do have a Patreon. If you guys have been enjoying the show, we would appreciate any support, and that includes leaving us a review on Facebook or iTunes. That helps spread the word about not only Knights of Ren but Star Wars Destiny to more people, which means more players and a bigger community. And we absolutely have just enjoyed every single moment with all the people that we've had the pleasure of talking to. So with that being said, this week is over. We are going to have a special guest in one of the upcoming shows, potentially next weekend. Corey, the head designer of this game, the opposite player of Luke Litzinger, he is going to be joining us. We're going to be talking about what he thinks about head design, card games, just what he thinks about Star Wars, and just how he helped design such an amazing game. So you're definitely going to want to tune in next week for that show. And with that being said, thank you everyone for listening, and may the Force be with you.